Yes, well, yeah, it's just hard work, you know.
So, Robin, you're a
Yes.
full-time architect at NordCloud, a Microsoft Azure MVP, LinkedIn Learning instructor, and besides it, you also have a couple of community channels for yourself, like Robino.io. You're working at Streaming Clouds, which
Mhm.
recently announced its own community channel using Discord. So you seem to be everywhere. I cannot open Twitter or LinkedIn without seeing your face on my screen. So where do you get the time? I mean, how are you doing all of this?
Good question. Um, yeah, well, trial and an error, I think. No, it's there's a plan and an approach behind trying to maximize your output, right? But prioritizing. Okay, let me lay this out, right? Okay, so there are a lot of things that I do. I have my job 9 to 5, like you already mentioned, right? So a cloud solution architect at NordCloud. Then I have a live stream together with Kevin called Streaming Clouds. That's usually outside of office hours. Sometimes we do it in office hours, but depending on our guests. And then I have the Robino platform as well, where well you yourself write blog posts, right? So yeah, how do I do all of that, right? So first of all, I optimize my sleep, I optimize my nutrition, and I try to exercise at least 3 times a week. Right, this way I optimize my mind and my body to deliver. Next to this, I'm trying to use deep work or a flow state to get into a heightened, mode of concentration and heightened mode of focus, which allows me to, output results that I wouldn't be able to produce in a more of a distracted mind state. And yeah, what else do I do, right? And I yeah,
it seems
yeah,
like you're looking at what you just mentioned, the deep focus. It seems like it's becoming a second nature of you. So is that something you have been practicing along the years, or is that something that you have read about and just adopted? Or
well, first of all, I do have ADHD, so or I'm all over the place, or I'm really hyper focused, right? So I'm I honed this over the years, right? So it's whenever I'm in hyper focus, I lose track of time. I forget to eat. I forget to drink. Okay, that's not really good, right? But it's easy. Well, it's not easy, but when I'm in a heightened state of concentration, then I'm just going. It's flowing, and I'm able to produce whatever I need to produce. Right? No obstacles anymore. No self doubt. No questions. And okay, where am I going? Where am I going with this? So yeah, that's one thing, and another thing, it's a skill that you need to practice, right? Just like running a marathon, for example, right? It's not something you can just do right now if you don't have the proper training and prepare yourself. So in your mind and your focus is just like another muscle, right? So you need to train it, you need to hone it, and then eventually you can use it more efficiently or deliberately, or you can really use it as a tool. So something else that I do in the morning, and I have a morning routine, which usually starts with not touching my phone, right? So no social media, no late night emails that I look at in the morning, or anything else that surprises me. So I'll wake up. Sometimes I fail though, but okay, that's another story. So I aim not to touch my phone in the morning. No distractions, no other things. I meditate in the morning, like 10 minutes, breathing exercises, meditation, whatever. It's like honing that refocus skill, right? You're going to sit there in complete stillness, focus on your breathing. And then whenever your thoughts arise or you're distracted, at one point you realize that and you draw back into that focus point, whatever that may be for you, right? And this is practicing that focus, that flow state as well. After that, I journal, and not like, hey, dear diary, somebody yesterday made fun of me or whatever. No, more as in um, gratitude exercises. So, what am I grateful for? Right, like three things. And equally important, what are the three things that I'm trying to accomplish today? It can be anything, right? It can be reading a book, it can be walking with my dog, it can be anything. But the three things that I prioritize today to accomplish, right? So usually I accomplish more, but if I accomplish these three things that I write down in the morning, that should be a successful day, right? A fulfilled day. So, these three things, no social media or any other distractions, taking time for yourself, meditating, calming down your mind, trying to, train that refocus capability or skill, and then journaling. And after that, like half an hour taking care of myself, I start doing what I think is most important that day. Right. And usually that's around 8, and I start working around 9. So usually that's an hour for myself, something that I think is important for whatever I'm doing. So that can be working on the LinkedIn Learning course, can be strategizing something for the communities that we're running, because you're involved in one as well. Can be writing a blog post, can be, take care of anything else that I think is important. Then during the day, and half, like half or a little bit later, I try to exercise, go to the gym or go for a run, or do anything that I triggers your heart rate, right, and challenges your body. And then I also try to walk 1 hour with my dog, be outside, catch some sunshine, right. And it's funny, me and my girlfriend do turn by turn, right? So every morning it's or either my turn or her turn, right? So then either one of us can already start doing what they need to do. But usually, because I work from home 100%, I don't have any travel time, so that allows me to spend that time differently, and it makes it easier for me to go for a walk or anything else. As long as I produce what needs to be produced that day, nobody complains, right? So that's a certain level of trust that I earned. But it's also something that, I need to deliver, because otherwise somebody is going to be more closely monitoring what I'm doing and how I'm spending my hours, right? So, and a lot of it is outside of my control as well, right? Certain customer meetings or meetings with stakeholders, or something that needs to be delivered, or something that's on fire, right? Certain things you cannot really plan.
It seems like you have this very structured approach or
Hmm.
program, if you will, that you start running every day. So it
Hmm.
almost seems like a run book to you. Well, the day starts and your alarm clock is going, and you're
Hmm.
waking up and you're starting your program. But it seems like to be very difficult to adapt to situations have not that have not been put in your
Hmm.
program. So
Hmm.
when things come across that you haven't planned or couldn't foresee, how are you adapting to those kind of situations?
Well, nothing's perfect, right? So this is what I'm trying to accomplish, right? And sometimes, I do touch my phone in the morning, but I can plan that, or it's my own fault. But if something else occurs, and then I have to just plan accordingly, right? And sometimes I'm not able to finish all the things that I wrote down in that morning, because something else with a higher priority just came up, right? So then I just adjust, right? So I do have my schedule, I do have my run book or my operating model, right? But life just happens, right? So I'm not trying to be too hard on myself or my schedule. And sometimes I fail, right? Or I mess up. And then I'm trying to learn from it, and move on. So there are periods where I don't journal. This morning I didn't feel like it. I don't know why. I was like, oh, let me already start doing this. And then there are times that I don't meditate. But recently I started incorporating that again, like a couple of weeks ago. And my girlfriend always tells me like, "Oh, you're meditating again," because she notices that I'm easier, or more calm, more collected somehow, and it only takes like 10 minutes, right? So yeah, circle back on your story because I'm I'm drifting away, but um, and circle back on what you just said. I try not to be too hard on myself and my schedule.
All right. Yeah. Well, I know you for quite some time, and I know your
Mhm.
learning curve.
Mhm.
Is it something you have always done over the past years, or is it in recent years that you, well, give you yourself, as you say, an operating model for going through the day, or is it something you have been practicing for only a recent time?
It's a good question. Um, for the last couple of years, it's more deliberate. So I'm really thinking about it and I'm honing it. But I've always been uh, structuring whatever I was doing, right? There were times that I didn't prioritize my sleep and I was messing around with technology until late at night. Wake up early in the morning again, and maybe because I was quote unquote younger, that it was more easily to do. So for the last couple of years, I'm prioritizing my sleep because I know if I could get a good night's sleep, then everything else comes easier. But yeah, I always had a form of structure, hence ADHD. Right, find a way for myself. Find my own way of structuring everything. Like 5 years ago, I got diagnosed, whatever you want to call it, but I could put a sticker on my forehead, like okay.
Well,
I
it's
tried.
always nice to have a label and you get to be part of some kind of group, but I'm not sure if this is the label you were waiting for. However, um, I think it works for you, right? So
It does.
circling back again to your learning curve, and I
Mm,
want to go somewhere with this. So looking at 10 years ago, Robin Smorenburg, 10 years ago,
mm,
I knew you then. You
mm,
weren't the, well, let's say, community leader that you are now.
mm,
So I figure that a lot of people are following you, for example, on Robino.io, which is a learning platform where the tagline is "Let's get better together."
mm.
What would you advise to the people that are following you or joining you and are crunching to get some this just a tiny bit of the learning curve that you had in the recent years? How do you achieve that flow for continuous learning and continuous improvement of yourself?
Good question. Um, First of all, recently I'm starting to question myself, like, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Right? I still haven't found the answer. I think that a lot of people ask themselves, like, okay, what motivates me, what drives me, and why am I putting so much energy in whatever I'm doing? Um, at this point, I'm just like, yeah, I just want to see how far I can take it, and it's something I'm good at, and something I enjoy doing. Do you need more? Right? So that's more of a life quest or something. Yeah. Why do we exist? Like, ooh, okay. It's not something we're going to discuss today, but um, yeah, I'm just trying to keep improving. Right. For a long time, that was just technology. So I started working as a support engineer, system administrator. Worked my way up through different companies. At one point, we were working together. Right. Started doing consultancy before that. Always work with Microsoft technologies, always like Office automation type of technologies, Active Directory, Exchange, SQL Server, Hyper-V eventually, the whole Microsoft stack, RDS, right? Um, and I always challenged myself and always were prioritizing my learning curve, basically. So I always spend extra additional time, like, okay, everybody stops at 5. I'll just go on for 1 or 2 hours more because I want to understand this, right? Or start a little bit earlier, sooner, whatever. And because of this, people were noticing my motivation, my drive, right? So people were making time out of their own schedule to mentor me, to learn me certain things because they were like, okay, this guy is willing to put in the work.
Mhm.
So I always worked on myself and specifically on technical skills, technical capabilities. And for the last couple of years, what is it, 3 years, whatever, just throw a number out there.
Mhm.
I'm also including a lot more personal development. Right, you develop as a person automatically because of your life experiences, and you just become hopefully a better and better person over time, right? But if you're more aware, so you develop a certain self-awareness, then you can also look at yourself in the mirror, reflect on certain things like, okay, am I doing this right? Am I taking this in the right direction? Okay, what are my weaknesses? Right? And everybody has them, and I have a lot as well. So by prioritizing these weaknesses, you can even, grow faster or become even better as a person. And because you're prioritizing personal development, and also things like sleep, nutrition, exercise, and all these things. The other things that technology becomes easier as well, right? Because you're optimizing yourself for whatever you're doing. Uh, Plus, I do think that if you focus on the fundamentals, right? Networking, storage, compute, they're all list. If you're
Mhm.
interested, it's on robino.io as well.
There's some marketing out there. Yeah, great
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah. No, but at one point, I started in IT, and I was, dragging around with switches, racking and stacking servers, installing operating systems, bootstrapping servers, whatever, RAID configurations, all that, stuff that's still until still today is being used, but
Mhm.
not directly by me. It's in most cases it's managed by Microsoft. So they do rack and stack switches, or rack and stack racks, or rack and stack containers, whatever they do with their data centers. But if you just look at Azure, it's a Microsoft managed data center, which they build some form of abstraction on top of, which we can consume by using ARM. So the API, PowerShell, Azure CLI, or the portal, right? But I know that there's still compute, networking, storage, et cetera, going underneath whatever we see, right? So at
Would
one
would
point,
you
it becomes much easier for someone who is doing this for a longer time, or who has this, um, you know, conceptualized all these different things, to wrap your head around new technologies. Like, oh, okay, Kubernetes, okay, but what is it actually? What are we doing, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And then you look at it from a different perspective, and then of course you still need to get into all the nitty gritty details, and you still need to become comfortable in the command line and all the commands and know what you're doing. But it's not as scary as it can be, because you're like, oh, wait a minute, this just runs on servers or virtual servers or whatever, right? We're virtualizing a workload, not necessarily from a virtual machine, but from an application perspective. Right, and we're orchestrating that, and we still have to deal with CPU and memory and storage and networking, right? So it shifts a little bit, but the core of what we're doing doesn't necessarily change, right? So yeah, that
Would you still be
realization.
able would you still be able to fulfill your job, your responsibilities if you hadn't have that experience with racking and stacking servers, so knowing your IOPS, your CPU or networking expertise. So there are a lot of younger people out there who are now in school or just starting with cloud
Mhm.
computing. Um, can they do it without those basic skills you were just mentioning, which you are naming, giving the name of fundamentals? Is it fundamental to achieve a cloud career to know those kind of technologies?
Yes and no. Wait, let me rephrase that. It depends. No, no, okay. No, I think to a certain degree it does, right? If you want to become really successful and adaptable, and being able to learn new things fast, right? Because everything moves fast, so you need to be able to learn fast. And I think, first of all, learning is a skill, right? So it's something that you can learn yourself how to learn, basically, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, it makes sense.
It's But to circle back on your question, I do think that it's crucial to understand what happens underneath the hood. For example, I'm a developer. I'm developing a serverless function. So I use function.
Azure functions.
function
Yeah.
programming constructs and stuff. And okay, I deploy my function on an Azure function, and I do need to tie into some workload that's running somewhere, right, inside of Azure, and it can be quote unquote a traditional workload. So I have to understand networking to a certain degree. Right? I have to understand authentication and authorization to a certain degree, because how is that function going to authenticate and get the necessary authorizations to do whatever it needs to do, right? So I do have to think about all these fundamental things to come up with the best solution possible. Or if something doesn't work, then I need to troubleshoot it. And if I don't know, what happens underneath, then I probably don't know what to look for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
I do think that the fundamentals are crucial. And I'm not saying understand networking from, a bits and bytes perspective and different buffers and everything that goes underneath. But do know the difference between TCP and UDP. Do know about IP addressing and firewalling, stateless versus stateful, right? Why is my packet not coming back, right? Yeah, okay, because what are we dealing with, right? Is it stateful or stateless? Do I have to create additional rules to make sure that my packet comes back? Because otherwise, it doesn't understand what to send the packet back to. So, there are certain things that are crucial to understand from any or for anyone who is practicing some IT related or technology related, job or position.
cool. Yeah. So would you rather have people to just dive in within the new technologies and come around the more, well, I hate to say the classic or traditional technologies, because under the hood it's still the engine of the newer
Mhm.
technologies, as you say. So, but would you rather have your your younger people that you are mentoring right now, would you rather have them starting from the new school perspective, so creating an Azure function and run into problems and learn from that, going deep diving into those
Mhm.
details? Or would you rather have them to start with, as we say, the fundamentals, and from that perspective approach the newer technologies?
The last one, actually, the latter. So fundamentals, right? As an example, I'm mentoring a couple of people. One of them is just starting out. He already did AZ 900, right? And he was looking at the AZ 104, Azure Administrator Associate. And, we had a call and I was asking about his experience, and he doesn't have too much experience. So he was able to wrap his head around the Azure Fundamental certification, but he didn't really realize what happens underneath, right? Like, okay, and okay, what would be the next step? So based on some input that I got out of the communities, I was like, hey, think about maybe a CompTIA, you know, cloud agnostic or IT vendor agnostic certification, and not necessarily the certification. So I went ahead and advised him to start working on the CompTIA A plus certification, and not necessarily passing the certification, but at least acquiring the knowledge, right? Because that's something else we can discuss as well. But to get some familiarity with, okay, how does a computer operate? What are the different components? How do they relate to each other? What is an operating system even, right? And what different types of storage do I have? And all these other things that you have to think about when you look at a computer. And if that's a desktop, a laptop, or a server in a server rack, they all do the same, right? Basically. So my advice was to start at the beginning, get a little bit more familiarity with these different concepts, and then start building on top of that by aiming for the AZ 104, which nowadays is also a prerequisite for the AZ 305. So to become a solution architect, you need to pass the 104 as well. So I do think that Microsoft is looking at it as well. Like, okay, what is a good learning path for somebody to become a solutions architect? Okay, that starts at being an administrator or an engineer, right? At least in my book. There are other takes on this as well. But I do think that having a healthy degree of experience will definitely help you along the line. So can it yeah start at the beginning and then just work your way up, right? And if you look at where I am today, yeah, I mean I'm doing this for 15 years, right? So um, give yourself the time as well. Nobody's chasing you. It can be that you're looking to optimize your life or reach a certain point of comfort or money wise or anything that motivates you to do what you do. But allowing yourself the time to grow is crucial as well, right? Nobody can sprint a marathon, right? So if you try to sprint a marathon, then you'll probably won't make it to the end.
You'll
Right,
be
so
exhausted if you even make it. Yeah, right.
probably
I
won't
hear
make
what you're
it.
saying there.
You're sprinting, then you're gonna crawl, right? So you need to find a pace that's maintainable, right? Something that you can keep up. And of course, it's fine to sprint sometimes, right? Sometimes I'm burning the candle at both ends because I know I'm asking too much of myself, but I'm doing it deliberately, and I know that I cannot maintain this for weeks or months, right?
Mm.
So after that, I know that, and I know that I need to recover. So then I need to do something else, relax, play a game, go out with friends or whatever, right? So it's an healthy balance. Yeah, I'm I'm drifting away from our conversation. What was it we were
No,
talking
that's not a
about?
problem at all because I think you're saying very, very useful things for people that are listening right now and that are actually trying to achieve what maybe you have achieved or are trying to grow within a cloud engineering career or a cloud architecting career.
Hmm.
So, um, moving forward on that topic, because looking at Azure, I mean, we are at Azure Talks, so let's talk a bit
Hmm.
of Azure.
Hmm.
Ignite is coming up
Hmm.
in the cloud. One thing is for certain, and that is that every day new features and updates and innovations are being pushed towards us.
Hmm.
Um, how do you keep up? Because you have to start with the fundamentals. We're talking about technology, which, well, even looking at IT as a sector or as a practice, um, there are still people alive who have seen the first computer, where people in lab coats were standing next to the first computer, which was even bigger than most of the buildings here in the Netherlands. I mean,
Hmm.
how are you keeping up with this fast cycle of innovations that the big tech companies like Microsoft are handing over to us?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think if the answer is in all whatever we already discussed now, but it's a good question.
Looking at yourself. So, what
Yeah.
are channels or ways
Okay.
or what are your channels to keep up with what's new in the market?
Social media, specifically LinkedIn and Twitter. I do think that a lot of valuable information is being shared on both platforms. Right, so following me, for example, or you, or others who are actively sharing new developments, right? Azure MVPs, if we're talking about Microsoft and Azure in this case, are usually keen on sharing new things, right? Because yeah, that's what we like. That's what we do, among other things as well. But so first of all, social media, um, Microsoft Blog. Yeah, what else? Right, I'm always trying to keep my ears and eyes open for whatever's happening in the market. Right, so there are a lot of AI things being developed and a lot of AI based services being released. So I think that there's more of that to come. But yeah, how do I know that? Because I try to listen to podcasts. I try to uh, watch certain user group sessions, live streams, or other streams of information where others are sharing what they're busy with, or stuff that they're seeing, or stuff that their customers are struggling with, or just fancy innovative technology that they're enthusiastic about, or anything, right? So yeah, it's a mixed bag, I think, of different channels, platforms, whatever. And sometimes one of the benefits that I have is it's um, nobody needs to motivate me, right? It's motivation from within,
Mhm.
intrinsic, whatever motivation,
Yeah.
right? So it's part of what I love, part of what I like to do, right? So I don't mind. Well, I don't mind doom scrolling anyway because that's what the platforms make you do. But sometimes I'm deliberately just looking at new things, or I'm spending some time on a podcast when I walk outside, or include other things around my 9 to 5 to keep up to date with whatever's coming. So yeah, and whenever I see something that really interests me, then yeah, sometimes I go into a rabbit hole, right? And then yeah, before you know it, you're like, oh, okay, wait, what am I doing here? And then you get out, but all the things that you learn and relearn and also teach to others, because that's a way of learning as well. They all stick, and they're all in there somewhere. I'm not saying that I know everything top of mind, but I do know enough to search for something specific or whatever, and then re-enable these neurons who include who hold that information, if that how your mind works anyway. But so it's how do you say that? It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I hope that
believe
makes
that.
sense. But
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that there's not one channel or one source where you can extract all that updates and innovations and new technologies from. Neither can you
no,
read there how you will implement it or how you will use it to increase the value of your customers or your own organization, right? So,
no, and
um,
I think we haven't even said that, but I think it's important to relay that whenever we can. But it's perfectly fine not to know anything, not anything. No, that's not the case. But not to know everything, right? So
mm,
you can't know everything, right? Even when you look at Azure as a platform and all the capabilities and services that they have, right? You can categorize these services, and I'm not a big IoT guy or somebody who's done a lot with the data platform. That's Synapse or other types of data engineering services, or whatever. I know when you when you can use it, or I know when to use it, and I know enough to work with it as a solution architect. But if you ask me to you know build out the complete solution, then yeah, maybe eventually I will be able to do it, but nowhere near um, the way that somebody who specialized in it can do it, right? So what I'm trying to say is that you need to have a focus area, um, to, to to focus on but a focus area that really interests you, and then it's really easy or easier to challenge yourself to keep up, because it's something that really interests you, right? So for me, I recently for a while now, I'm really focused on Kubernetes and cloud native, right? So container orchestration, but also serverless Kubernetes in the form of Azure container apps, right? And things like that. Like, okay, how do you know, build a microservices application, or things like, okay, monolith versus microservice, and all the other things that entail. But what I'm trying to say is make sure that you focus on something that really interests you, and then it becomes easier to keep up.
yeah. So I also believe in that model wherein you have a broad perspective or a broad focus and one deep focus. So for
Hmm.
you, that broad focus is maybe cloud or Microsoft Biosystem or Azure. Well, I know you have a LinkedIn Learning track for Google Cloud Platform, so
Hmm.
maybe doesn't apply to you because your broad focus is more broader than most of us. But and you have this deep focus for Kubernetes for now for a while.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk technology, or let's talk practice. You as a Nord Cloud architect working with customers,
Hmm.
what are current projects that you are working on, and how are you thriving value to your customers?
That's a good one. Have to be careful not to breach any NDAs, but
If you can't answer it, I have another question.
No, no, no. I can. The technologies that I'm currently working with are, well, a lot of Kubernetes, most of it on Azure, but some of it on other clouds as well, right?
Mhm.
So that we're talking about GCP and AWS. I've done GCP for a while, circled back to my Microsoft background, and started focusing on Azure again. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I cannot work with GCP or AWS, right? We're building a platform. I'm trying to think about what can I say and what I can't, but yeah, new technologies, but there are also some legacy challenges in there. I'm involved in a project where we're migrating like 1,000 VMs to a cloud platform, and these are all, well, VM based workloads, quote unquote traditional workloads that we're going to be migrating and eventually going to be modernizing as well. So we're looking at code bases because, well, this customer writes some of their code or their applications themselves, but they also have like off the shelf products. So we need to look at that. So a part of it is migrating, but another project, we're building a platform from scratch, based on two clouds. So that's quite interesting. Some blockchain technology in there as well, some private blockchain. Um, Geez, what else? What else? Another customer who's has a really interesting take on multi-cloud. They're like, okay, well, we're offering our business like the three major cloud platforms as an option, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't really matter which platform you choose; they're all evenly mature, configured. So they all have proper landing zones set up. They're all, properly set up for your applications to be landing on that platform. So the last one to include was GCP. So that's something we're working on. Quite interesting as well. So we're deploying like a landing zone there now. So it's a little bit all over the place. To be honest, I'm a little bit too much involved in meetings and presentations and all that other stuff. So at the end of the day, I'm an engineer, right? Who likes to
Mhm.
talk and has, well, quite some experience. So I'm able to fulfill like a architect role with that. But yeah, at the end of the day, I just like to mess around with technology, engineer stuff, think about the bigger picture. Are we delivering what we need to deliver, right? So are we still paying attention to the business requirements? Are we still focused enough on the value that we're trying to produce, or are we over engineering and just like to build fancy things because that's what we do, right? So a little bit of everything, and hopefully with a new engagement that I'll start working on the 1st of October is getting my hands a little bit more dirty as well. So yeah.
It's quite interesting what you're telling because you're an engineer or an architect or
Hmm.
well, a little bit of both maybe.
Hmm.
Um, and you're saying that you're a lot within meetings and you're considering business requirements, but you're also working with technology. Are we in the transition of that technical jobs are becoming more and more business jobs, human jobs? Do we need more of those soft skills to enable our customers or organizations we're working with to actually adopt technology?
What was your question? If we need to focus more on soft skills and that as techies we actually need to communicate more and all that stuff. Is that what you're?
Yeah, and maybe even try to understand processes or business
Mm.
models.
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
To a certain degree, yeah. Yeah.
how does that affect the? I, I see you as the learning master, right? So you can't be the master before mastering the basics. It's something that you have said to me quite a while ago, and it keeps popping up in my head. And I'm just elaborating now on what are those basics. Those basics are, of course, as we just circling around back to the
Hmm.
topic earlier, the fundamentals, which is storage, CPU, networking.
Yeah.
But has business skills or maybe even empathy become a fundamental as well to
Oh,
become
wow,
a good
yeah.
cloud engineer?
Well, of course, I think the more empathy you have, the better. The more developed your soft skills are, the better, right? But for that as well, yeah, okay, it's an interesting story. Um, when I was younger, I was always technically capable of of my direct colleagues who are usually, well, quite some years older, right? So
Mhm.
I was technically always ahead of the curve, if you want to call it like that. But yeah, usually you get into that whole salary discussion because I love what I do, but I
We've
also,
all been there. Yeah.
yeah, I love what I do, but I also need to pay the bills, right? So and some. So then you have that salary discussion, or you talk with your colleagues about it, and eventually have a pretty clear picture of who's making what.
Yeah.
And at one
Yeah.
point, I went to my manager. I'm like, "Why is this guy making 1,000 a month more as we're doing the same stuff in projects, right?" He said, "Yeah, he has more experience." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, but we're doing the same things. Our hourly rate is the same. We're working together on the same thing. So how is that? Yeah, he's older." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, well, great excuse, right?"
It's something that comes
Yeah,
for
but at that
itself over the
point,
years.
I
Yeah.
I wasn't able to wrap my head around that concept, as in, okay, and the more mature I became, the softer I became towards that attitude or towards that statement, as in, okay, I'm a much completer, or better is not the right term, but I'm much more capable. Let me rephrase it, right? I'm much more capable than I'm right now than like 5 years ago.
Mhm.
It's night and day for me, right? So I do think that um, becoming a better person from a soft skill perspective does come with time automatically, and you can even enhance it by focusing on specific areas, right? Like I certainly had a realization, like, oh wait, I do have an ego, right? Everybody has one, and it has, pros and cons. Sometimes you have to keep it in check, but it's also something that motivates and creates a certain drive, right? So I'm not saying get rid of your ego completely, but just the realization, the awareness of like, oh, wait a minute, what's happening? Why am I responding the way I'm responding, right? I cannot stand wrongdoing, or people who are unfair, unfairness. So whenever that happens, I get this fire from within, right? And then my emotion takes over. I'm not a nice person then. I become really direct, and at least what's going on, right?
Mhm.
But the more I realize that, the better I can direct it and the better I can use it as a tool as well, right? Or don't use it deliberately when it's not appropriate, right? What is it I'm trying to achieve here, and how am I going to be able to do that without my emotions taking over, right? And now it's all good. We're here having a nice discussion, and nothing of that sort is applicable now. But sometimes you're in certain situations, and then yeah, it just happens, right? And then you look back at it, reflect. So to circle back on your question, um, I do think it becomes more and more important. Soft skills, that is, or personal development, or whatever you want to call it. Right? Some people hate the term soft skills. But focus on everything else and just the technology. Right? You can even take that a step further, right? Understanding business requirements, but I do also think that it's a natural progression. So, to lower the bar or lower the expectations a little bit for someone who's listening to this and who's just starting out, focus on stuff that matters, right? Focus on stuff that's right in front of you, and try to forget about everything else. And
Mhm.
if that's being able to do your job from a technical perspective, because that's eventually what we need to bring to the table, especially as a support engineer or a cloud engineer or whatever. Right, the core of what we do is technology. But at one point, you also have to think about, hey, okay, what are certain characteristics that I have that are not really suiting me, or things that I need to work on, or am I optimizing myself? Do I sleep enough? Things like that. Right. So I do think that comes with time, and you need to have the bandwidth. Right. You cannot do everything at once. So step by step, right? And that's something else I would like to highlight. Step by step, consistency. So try to show up every day and do something, right? Even if it's half an hour. For 30 days, 30 minutes is 900 minutes a month that you can spend on something to become better at something. And that's excluding everything else you do that day, right? So if I want to become better at whatever, name something, Kubernetes, but I don't really have a lot of time, then I can squeeze everything in the weekend. But I do also need to relax and trying to find that balance. So what I like to do is then, spend like 30 minutes or an hour a day for 5 days or for 7 days, depending on whatever I have going in the weekend. And then, try to do that over and over and over again, right? Everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people underestimate or overestimate what they can do in, a year, but they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Right? If you just
That's
show
true.
up and do the work and be consistent, right? So small steps, and that accumulates over time.
Mm.
Right. So yeah.
Yeah, that's actually true. And Robin, I want to thank you for doing this. I think we have to wrap it up. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Is there any last message you want to put out there?
Oh yeah. If you need anything, help, or you're stuck or whatever, reach out to the community. Right? The community
Where
is
where
full.
where where can we find you online? Where can we
Or you
find
can find me everywhere except on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. But the rest, the rest you can find me. No, I'm on LinkedIn under my name. I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is my first and my last name, Robin Spornberg or Robin Spornberg, whatever you want to call it. You can find me on robino.io. That's Robin with an O.io. Yeah, well, you can find Rolf there as well. And you can find me on streaming clouds. Well, we have a YouTube channel. That's what it is about, right? We're a live stream, multi-cloud live stream. Well, we're a little bit biased by now, but we're trying to be a multi-cloud live stream. But you can also find me on community.streamingclouds.io. So yeah, whatever floats your boat, right? So yeah, on that note, if you need any help or you're stuck or you need to bounce something off of someone, just reach out. It can be me, can be Rolf, can be anyone else in the community. That's what the community is about. So yeah, get better together.
Yeah, what an end! What an end! Well, to all of you listening, and thank you for joining us today. Hope you will join us for the next episode, and hope to see you within the communities. Take care.
Bye.